how crazy is it that we're already up to the 7th month of the year? I feel like it was only last week that I was doing my February wrap up, and now here we are at June's wrap up. Welcome back, guys. Today we are going to be discussing all of the books that I read in June, and I feel like these are honestly my favorite videos to do. But before we do that, we've got to address the elephant in the room, which is that we have 1,000 subscribers on this channel. That is insane to me, and I can't believe you're all here. It's only been 6 months. The fact that you're all here blows my mind. Love you all, and I hope that you all find a book that maybe you can add to your TBRs in this video. For those of you who haven't watched one of my reading wrap-ups before, I'm going to tell you each and every book that I read. I'll give you a short summary of the book and then my rating and my thoughts on it. I read 9 books this month, which I think is the same that I read last month as well. Of these 9 books, 5 were fantasy books and 3 were romance books, and then we had 1 rogue thriller book in there as well. So let's get into the 9 books that I read this month. The first book I read this month was The Lies of Locke by Scott Lynch. This is set in a medieval, Venice-inspired magical world where a group of street thieves, led by Locke, attempt to pull off a very ambitious heist on the nobility of the city. But they're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place when they come into contact with some sinister magical forces called the Bonds Magi, who have this creepy ability to control people with their magic. So that's the essence of the story. It is a reread. I read this one last year and I ended up giving it 4 stars. This is insane. It's like Six of Crows meets Swordcatcher with a hint of Game of Thrones. I think that's the best way of describing it. So if you like any of those books, you better add the Gentleman Bastard sequence to your TBR. This book had the most enchanting, witty writing, lovable characters, and an amazing world, and an introduction to a really cool magic system, as well as a plot that was high stakes. It had a lot of bravado and intelligence into it. I love this book so much. If you know me, you know Six of Crows is one of my favorite books of all time, and this just reminded me of like a more adult version of that in the best way. One thing to note about these books are that they are very slow paced, and this goes for the entire series, which I will be reviewing further on. They are very slow paced because there's just so much effort put into establishing the backstory of the characters. It's told in dual timelines, and also fleshing out the worlds. I have nothing else to say about it. It shouldn't be any surprise that after that book, the next one I picked up was Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch, which is the second book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence. This book kind of builds upon what happened in The Lies of Locke, except it's more of a pirate story because it does take place on a ship, and it's set 2 years after the conclusion of the previous book, and it continues the journey of the Gentleman Bastards, but this time on sea. That's all you need to know. 4.5 stars. This book took every single thing that made The Lies of Locke great and just made it better. The characters were infinitely more interesting in this book. The wit, like, it had me giggling out loud in public. And our story actually opens at a casino, and I really enjoyed the scenes there because they're just, the way our characters act and interact with the world around them, just so good. The world is also a lot more built up in this story. We explore different places, and the magic really intrigues me here because the author for this whole book does not fully explain the magic system. He didn't in the last book either, but that makes it creepy and sinister because we don't know what to expect. The characters don't know what to expect. So it just keeps you on the edge of your seat. And the author somehow manages to maintain perfect tension in the midst of complex world building and complex characterization. It was a step up from the book before, and I was so happy about it. I did take an itty bitty pause from that series, which I deeply regret, and I moved on to a book that I picked up in a charity book fair. That was Portrait of a Spy by Daniel Silva. This book is part of the series that follows Gabriel Allen, who is a spy. This book basically begins when Gabriel and his wife Kiara are on a romantic little weekend away when a bomb goes off in London. So he immediately has to clock in at work as a spy and try and investigate where these new attacks are coming from and take down the terrorism operation behind it. I was this close to DNFing this book. I gave it 2.5 stars. I did not enjoy it. Now, firstly, it was my bad for blind buying this. This is why I don't blind buy books. It sounded exactly up my alley when I read the back. But as I got to reading it, firstly, I struggled to connect to our characters because I I started it in the middle of a series. I just really didn't care for anyone in the story. Another thing I really wanted to note here is the author has a very obvious political bias, and I wasn't aware of it because I didn't research anything about this story. Gabriel Allen is a Mossad agent. I thought he was MI6 or something. Anyway. And yeah, sometimes it did feel like the author was trying to clobber you over the head with his political opinion, and it was really evident in the way he characterized certain people and certain groups. But moving on to bigger and better things, and by bigger and better things I mean One Golden Summer by Carly Fortune, which was our next book. This book is about Alice, a burnt out photographer who decides to journey with her grandmother to a lake house for the summer, the same lake house where she once spent a summer when she was a teenager. Now during that trip that she took when she was younger, she captured the perfect photo, which is actually the cover of this book. The photo of the 3 teenagers on a boat. But what happens when she realizes the boy from this photo is now her neighbor at the lake house? Guys, I feel sometimes during the winter time exactly what I need is a summer romance, because this just made me feel really good. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. It's just a lovely, light-hearted summer romance. This book genuinely does feel like Golden by Harry Styles, which is what inspired the title actually. It was a pretty straightforward romance book. Like obviously there were a couple of other things going on, like with regards to our main character's grandma, with regards to our male main character. Overall, I really did find this just such an easy breezy read. However, and this happens all too often in romance books, there is always a reason why the main couple can't be together. And it was a pretty stupid, pretty flimsy reason in this story, and it really bugged me because I thought adults would be a little more mature about this, but how do you get to your 30s without being able to communicate or be emotionally mature? I'm not quite certain. That really annoyed me, but overall, because of the reading experience I had and because of the feeling it gave me, especially coming off the back of a book I really did not like, I did end up giving this one 4 stars. This was fun. I highly recommend it, especially if you're lucky enough to live in the Northern Hemisphere and you're watching this and you haven't read this. What are you doing? It's literally summertime. Go read this book. The next book I read is no surprise to absolutely anyone. It was The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch, and this is the 3rd book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence. It's not a completed series, by the way. It's just that the author is taking his sweet time to write every book. So this is the most recent release, and by recent I mean it came out over a decade ago. The sinister magical forces from the past 2 books, the Bonds Magi, they are back, except this time they want the help of the Gentleman Bastards to rig an election in their hometown of Carthage. This book also follows a little bit more of a romance plotline because it looks at a past gentleman bastard called Sabitha and her relationship to our gentleman bastards. In this Carthage election, there are 2 different factions, and the Bonds Magi are on different sides trying to rig the election. One side is trying to employ Locke and Jean, the other gentleman bastard, to rig the election in their favor. Meanwhile, the other side has hired Sabitha, an ex-gentleman bastard, to go against Locke and Jean. It was just so interesting, and I don't know how this book was almost, what, 700 pages long? Over 700 pages long. It did not get boring for a second. I wanted to keep reading. I was so entertained. This was a 5-star book. My first 5-star book of the entire month. This is definitely one of my top reads of June. Maybe one of my top reads of the whole year. Highly recommend the Gentleman Bastard sequence, especially if, like I said, you like Six of Crows, you like Swordcatcher, you like that sort of storyline. You are going to absolutely eat this up. If you don't mind the slower pacing and the more time spent on exploring the characters and the world, add this to your TBR now. And a hot new bombshell entered the villa because we found a new Ashley Poston book, which was Sounds Like Love. This book follows a burnt out songwriter called Joni who kisses a cocky ex-boy band member at a concert. And as they kiss, they begin to hear the same melody in their heads, and they start to hear each other's thoughts. So when Joni goes back to visit her family in the Outer Banks during the summer, she can somehow telepathically communicate with this random guy that she kissed at a concert. So he comes down to the small town in the Outer Banks as well, and they see if they can get to the bottom of this connection, and they soon begin to discover that in order to break their mental connection, they must finish the song together. In the midst of all of this, Joni is dealing with some family matters, namely her mother has early onset dementia, as well as the fact that she and that man, Sebastian, they both have their own personal issues that they are trying to work through, which writing the song together should help solve. Oh, I absolutely adored this book. This was a 4-star read for me. Once again, those summer feelings were there. It was set in the Outer Banks in North Carolina. Small town. There was like this one dance hall that everything revolves around. It's very much musical, beachy, feels to me kind of like a retro summer. Absolutely beautiful, and a lot of it boiled down to how music can unite us and tie us together and heal us as well. It brought tears to my eyes, especially the last couple pages. Oh my goodness, I was gone. It just had the perfect ingredients of a summer romance, and I am so happy that I read this book. But if you listen to any one of these reviews, please let it be this one. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab was next, and I gave this one 5 stars. This book follows 3 different young women who eventually become vampires and how their stories eventually intersect. This has been described as toxic lesbian vampires, and I feel like that's a pretty good general idea of what it is, but it also explores so much more than that in terms of hunger, like our hunger for connection, as well as hunger for vengeance, hunger for power. Hunger, I think, is the central theme in here, closely followed by connection. Of the 3 girls we follow, there is Maria, who lived in 16th century Spain. She was given away in marriage to a much older, much wealthier man, and she chooses vampirism as a means to free herself from this. And then there is Lottie, who lived in Regency London, and she was sent away to London to join in the season, the ton, the Bridgerton girls know. But she is a lesbian, and she's very well aware of this, so she ends up choosing vampirism as an escape from the societal shackles of her time. And our final character, Alice, is a student in Boston. She is originally from Scotland. She's moved all the way around to the other side of the world for college as a means of reinventing herself, finding more freedom and agency, and she is turned into a vampire completely by accident. The way that these girls' stories all tie together, the way that you feel like you've lived an entire lifetime with them, absolutely exquisite. V.E. Schwab just remains one of the best authors in the game. This was absolutely incredible. It was at this point that I entered a reading slump. After reading that, I couldn't think about anything else, and I really tried. I tried picking up The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Couldn't get very far in because I just kept thinking about that, like I had no motivation to read. I asked TikTok for a little bit of advice, and someone advised me to switch up the genre completely and just read a romance. I did have a book on my physical TBR, and it was The Other Brother by Tierney Page. This book comes out in July, and it's about a girl who, her fiance cheats on her, and she ends up falling for his brother, who is a musician in London. Let me just read you what it says on the back here. It says, ex-fiance's brother, forbidden love, spice, banter, found family, and slow burn. I was fortunate enough to get to attend an event for this very book with the publisher, and that's where I got this beautiful advanced reading copy, and it's signed as well. I haven't rated this one yet, but I am thinking something along like 2.75 to 3 stars, somewhere in that spectrum, because while I like the tropes that were listed and the ideas that were listed, I do think it fell a bit flat in its execution for me. The first, and I think the most major problem I had, was with the writing. It was very like telling, not showing. This is exactly what happened, and this is exactly how the character felt about it, and this is exactly what is going on. Another issue I really did have was there are a bunch of time jumps in this story. So after our main character gets cheated on, it just jumps forward in time. So there is a massive gap in the character development and relationship with the other brother development that is going on, because how are we going from 0 to 100? I don't know what happened in those intervening 6 months, 2 months, whatever. A lot of the relationship building just didn't happen. Another issue that I had with One Golden Summer, I also have with this book, which was, how are you 30 and not able to communicate? The only way that either of these characters were capable of making intelligent decisions was with the presence of their friends telling them exactly what is common sense to most people. I found the characters a little unlikable because of that, but yeah. For all my complaining, guys, though, this pulled me out of my reading slump. So whoever suggested reading this on TikTok, well done to you, because it did pull me out of my reading slump. And last but certainly not least, I know you've been waiting for this one, Katabasis by R.F. Kuang, and I was lucky enough to receive an early review copy for this. It releases in August. This book is about 2 academic rivals who study magic at Cambridge who must journey down into hell to save their professor's soul. Where does R.F. Kuang get these ideas? Because that is the coolest concept I have ever heard in my life. And they have to journey into hell, get their professor's soul, and make it back alive, accompanied by works of literature, mythology, works of philosophy, and mathematical concepts relating to hell. I had some high hopes for this book just because the content sounded exactly up my alley. I myself love history, mythology, religion, literature, so I thought this would 100% be up my alley. But guys, it was a 3-star read, which isn't by any means bad, but it certainly did not live up to my expectations. For the good parts, I want to say obviously the concept is riveting. Like, that's such a cool concept. R.F. Kuang's books are always extremely well researched, and it really shows in her writing. The effort that she's put into this story definitely does come through when reading this. And I also really did enjoy the specific moments in hell where it seemed questy. Like, there were little quest mythological style obstacles for our main characters to overcome that I found quite entertaining. However, I felt very disconnected from our main characters for up until at least 60% of the book. And the reason for that is in the very first chapters, we actually start the story. We start the story as Alice, our female main character, is about to descend into hell. So because we start the story very much in the thick of it, the first half of the book is very much consumed with telling us more about hell through the lenses of different texts and concepts and ways of thinking, rather than telling us about the characters themselves. So I know Alice is in hell, I know Peter is in hell, but I don't know who they are or why I should care about them. And that connection was severely lacking until well past the 50% mark. And also when it comes to telling us more through different works and mythologies and thinkers, at times it read like a journal article, in that these thinkers, works, whatever, were just thrown at you in the story with little to no explanation. They were just, a series of them would just be hurled into the page, and it was as though it was trying to sound academic but completely failing to tell us why these were meaningful things to mention in the story. I absolutely adore what this book was trying to do. I do, and I greatly appreciate the amount of thought that went into this story, but unfortunately it just wasn't my favorite, and I can't believe I'm saying that about Katabasis. Those are my thoughts on it, but I do recommend that you pick this up if you're interested in history, mythology, literature. I think it could be a book for you. And there you have it. Please let me know what your most anticipated July read is, and I may just add it to my TBR as well. But that is all from me this week. I'll see you next week. Bye!